TheFarms.com Wheat Report is brought to you by Altitude FX and BASF Canada.
Hello, I'm Ken Sapsford. I'm a research assistant with the Department of Plant Sciences at the College of Agriculture and Bioresources at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. I manage a field research program where we have research trials looking at weed control, both agronomic practices and different herbicide trials. What we're seeing on the prairies is that weeds are adapting to some of the practices that we've been approaching them with over the last number of years. And weeds are developing resistance to a number of modes of action of herbicides that we've been applying. And so what we need to do is develop a better management practice so that we have the tools of the herbicides that we're presently using so that we can use those into the future years. If we're using the same herbicide year after year, what we end up doing is putting the same pressure on that weed species so that it adapts to it and then it eventually becomes resistance. And we've seen resistance develop to group 1s and group 2 herbicides quite quickly over the last number of years. And just recently we now have some glyphosate resistant weeds, including kochia in Western Canada. So what we need to do is use multiple modes of action and multiple practices to control weeds. This should include things like using mixed modes of action every time you apply. Glyphosate in particular is a herbicide that is very important to our no-till direct seeding farming systems. And if we want to keep that herbicides available to us, we need to mix other modes of action in it whenever we apply glyphosate so that the weeds that we're trying to kill are hit by more than one mode of action. So the chances of developing resistance is less when you're applying 2 to 3 modes of action at once than when you're doing a single mode of action. The other thing is, a good crop rotation helps you to develop a good rotation on herbicides because a broadleaf crop typically has a different set of herbicides than a cereal crop does that you're applying to it with different modes of action attacking those weeds. The herbicide rotation comes with that crop rotation. Other thing is, one of our best weed control options is a competitive crop. So we want to take and seed our crop so that it gets out of the ground fast. It gets very competitive, grows well, good agronomic practices, good fertility, good seeding depths, good moisture. All of those things helps get that crop, good seed quality, gets that crop out of the ground and gets it competitive. So if we have a competitive crop, it will compete with the weeds. And the first one up wins. If you've got a strong crop, it's going to outcompete the weeds. If the weeds come up before the crop, those weeds are going to cause a lot more competition for that crop as it's trying to grow through the year. So utilizing those type of practices will help keep those herbicides available to us in future years. It's not just using mixes of herbicide, it's using a good management system to control weeds, get a competitive crop so that they can use that whole system in the future with good integrated pest management. When there's not a lot of weeds growing in the spring, when we're going about normally doing our burn-off application, what we've got to look at then is there's some weeds there, so go out and do your burn-off application because you need to get those little weeds that are just starting, those germinating. But if you can mix in a product that has a bit of a residual control in it, there's some of the group 14 products that have some residual, some group 4s, group 2s. Mix those in with your glyphosate when you're spraying your burn-off. They're going to give some residual control to keep those weeds that are just under the soil surface and not poking through yet, that your glyphosate's not going to affect them, but they're going to have some impact on them to keep them down so that they are not up there before your crop is. And so that way, it's one of the things you can utilize. Again, you're putting mixed modes of action at them. One's a little bit of a residual. It's going to carry on through the crop until you get into your in-crop spraying season. Herbicides have been around since basically the 40s. We got into the big years in the 1970s when we saw a lot of development of herbicides coming onto the market. And what farmers saw as better herbicides through the 60s, through the 70s, through the 80s, hitting the market. That era of discovery is gone. We're not seeing any new modes of action or new herbicides hitting the market. And so we have to be able to keep the herbicides that we presently have of a value to us. And if we're just going to use single modes of action, we're going to develop resistance in weeds and we're going to lose that herbicide to the producers. By using multiple modes of action, good integrated pest management approaches, we can keep the herbicides we have available to us for future years.
The Farms.com Wheat Report has been brought to you by Altitude FX and BASF Canada. Visit www.clearfield.ca/wheat for more cereal solutions.